Hey everyone, you're watching the Federalist live DNC Wednesday night after show. I'm culture editor Emily Jashinsky. I'm here to break down what we saw tonight. Kamala Harris just wrapped up her speech at the DNC. Obviously, she is the vice presidential nominee. She accepted the nomination tonight. We saw Hillary Clinton speak tonight. We saw Nancy Pelosi speak tonight. We saw Barack Obama speak tonight. This really was the biggest night of the convention so far, and it was interesting because on the pre-show, I kind of contemplated which Kamala Harris would we see tonight. How would Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama handle this task of continuing to stay on message for the DNC, which has really targeted the convention so far at swing voters, people who maybe voted for Obama and then voted for Trump. Obama said, he had a quote tonight where he said, "I understand why a lot of Americans are down on government." And that really has been a theme, I think, for the 3 days of the DNC that have occurred so far. And I should contextualize all of this and say the DNC continues to be extremely boring. I think, however, they've realized that's okay. I think they've realized that this isn't going to have a huge audience. It was down 48, last night it was down 48% from the same night in 2016. I think they've realized that there's nothing that can replicate that sort of like feel of having a live crowd. So they've sort of come to accept that. But they continue to have this, like Hillary Clinton, for instance, talked about all of the people who have come up to her in the last 4 years and said, "I didn't vote." And didn't take it seriously. This was basically the night where the Democratic Party made the Flight 93 case from the left. And that's something we've heard a lot, but I mean, there were a lot of quotes where the stakes were not just political, they were talking in terms of people's lives being on the line, the country being on the line. Any chance of success depends entirely on this election. Barack Obama said about the outcome or about the success of maintaining our, quote, democracy in 2020. Okay. I think it was a speech that he was, again, we've been talking about this all week, but he gave that speech from the Constitution Center in Philadelphia when for the past 3 months, he actually gave this sort of full-throated endorsement of the Constitution where he said, embedded in this document was a North Star that created a more just and perfect country. Embedded in this document was a North Star. That was his quote. This is something that for the past several months, you would never have heard the left talking about. I keep going back to this, but the Democratic Party's official Twitter account insinuated that President Trump's speech at Mount Rushmore on July 3rd had something to do with white supremacy because he was speaking in front of founders. And here we have the DNC night after night talking about the Constitution. It's really been interesting to watch. The only reason they can get away with it is because they don't have a live crowd. And I'm not necessarily saying a live crowd would boo the Constitution, but they would know for sure. For instance, people like Bill Clinton, maybe even Hillary Clinton, and honestly, maybe even Barack Obama would have to give different speeches if they were speaking in front of a live audience. The speeches that we've seen so far from every single candidate have been really aimed at those swing voters. There was a musical performance from Billie Eilish tonight, and Billie Eilish is this sort of Gen Z superstar who channels the angst that of course, all every generation in the sort of teenage years is angst-ridden, but this generation particularly having that burden of social media everywhere, Billie Eilish really resonates with them. Billie Eilish performed tonight, talked about the stakes in this election. Some people may have looked at that and thought, really, this is what the Democratic Party is doing, is putting this super leftist, hipster singer in front of everyone. I thought Billie Eilish gave a good performance, and I can understand how that sort of extends an arm to Gen Z and makes them think the DNC is like on their team. But at the same time, it's also not persuading people not to vote Democrat. So if you think that like the Dems putting Billie Eilish in front of an audience is a bad choice, I don't know, it's a bad choice. I mean, I think are people, is somebody in Michigan watching that and thinking, what the hell are the Democrats doing? Maybe, but I don't think Billie Eilish is going to make them not vote for them. The best case scenario is that it makes, an 18-year-old or an 18 to 22-year-old say, yeah, she's right. She knows that we should probably vote. So I don't think that was necessarily a blunder. But I think, generally this is a convention that has really been targeted at those Obama-Trump voters. And the only reason the Democrats can get away with that is because there's no live audience. It's actually, this convention has not been representative of where the party really is. I do think people like Obama saying things, having quotes that say, embedded in the Constitution was a North Star. Listen, I have been probably as freaked out as many of you have over the course of the last few months by the cultural upheaval. So if Democratic leaders want to normalize the Constitution and the Founding Fathers again, Muriel Bowser was wearing a George Washington t-shirt, the leftist mayor of DC the other night. If they want to normalize the Founding Fathers again in a bid to win people in the middle of the country and to sway those voters to tilt the election in Joe Biden's favor, I actually think that's a cultural net benefit. Bring it on. Yes, continue to, if we can start agreeing on our founding documents and the fundamental exceptionalism of this country again, I welcome it. Please do that. But let's remember that, again, this is a political calculation. It's not where the future of the party is. The future of the party is with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who gave a very brief speech last night. They gave her about a minute slot, and they gave Bill Clinton much longer than that, like a little less than 5 minutes, I think they gave Bill Clinton. Again, this is because they have control. They can speak, they want to speak to those sort of swing voters who remember Clinton era centrism as something that everyone could kind of get behind. So, that's what we're seeing right now at the DNC is very much, I have to give Democrats credit for at least recognizing the audience that they should be targeting, but they know that millennials and Gen Z are not tuning into their convention on a weeknight and watching 2 hours of these basically political ads strung together to resemble some sort of political convention. It'll be interesting to see how the RNC, who actually I think really has the benefit of going second in this situation, changes their model going forward. David Marcus, our New York correspondent, has a piece up on the Federalist right now today talking about how Republicans they must incorporate a live audience some way, somehow, not just sort of these people on Zoom into their convention. It'll be fascinating to see how Republicans actually improve on that, or if they have, other stuff pre-recorded. It'll be interesting to see, but the Democratic convention has been really boring, and I think they're okay with that. I think the case they're trying to make is that, we heard people talking about Biden's quote, he's going to bring back better. It's sort of these people who are exhausted by the chaos of the Trump presidency and really want to, go back to, it reminds me of what Jeb Bush said in the primary in 2015, 2016, where he said Donald Trump would be a chaos president. He's a chaos candidate, he'd be a chaos president. They're targeting their argument at people for whom that's persuasive, right? And it's amazing because they know, so tonight they talked about immigration, they talked about guns, they talked about climate change. They did kind of go through that checklist of the Democratic wish list, but the way that they did it was clearly targeted at the center. It was clearly trying to persuade swing voters, those people who are tuning into the DNC because they honestly don't know which direction to vote in. I don't know how much of the audience for this that is. A big part of this audience, like MSNBC had the highest ratings for the DNC in the past couple of days. So a big part of this audience is just partisans who want to cheerlead for Kamala Harris and all of the Democratic superstars that they've paraded across the convention for the past few nights. But, there are probably people that tune into the convention to say, what does this party stand for? It's been a crazy few months. I need to know who to vote for. I'm going to watch the convention. This was targeted at them. They were enabled to do that by the lack of a live audience. It's actually kind of worked out really well for them. Interestingly, their hosts every single night have been Hollywood people. So they went from Eva Longoria to Tracee Ellis Ross to Kerry Washington tonight. One of their speakers talked about bringing back supply chains, which is that weird sort of place of overlap between the kind of the Trumpist right and the far left. I didn't hear a ton of other conversation about that. Hillary Clinton said Black Lives Matter. Elizabeth Warren spoke in front of, she was in some sort of like schooling facility where the cubbies, there were foam letters that spelled out BLM. Kamala Harris spoke extensively about race relations. So there was a heavy focus on issues of racial justice tonight. But again, they're really trying to do all of this in a way that persuades voters in the middle of the road. And I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain that from now until November. There's one thing that I absolutely wanted to address is that there was this extended slideshow basically of vintage Joe Biden photographs, vintage Joe Biden footage. They showed black and white pictures of Nancy Pelosi. It's really interesting because they're basically, in 2016, Donald Trump's attack was that the political establishment, the career politicians, they're failing us. And here at the DNC, they're highlighting Joe Biden's record as a career politician. They're showing pictures of him, black and white, from decades ago, standing in front of the Amtrak. They're showing old pictures of Nancy Pelosi, who is like the mascot of the swamp. They're showing pictures of her, the swamp mascot, Nancy Pelosi, vintage pictures of her, saying, these people have been here forever. These people have been here forever, and that's why you should vote for them. This is really interesting because this is exactly what Trump campaigned against in 2016. There's a story out today, actually, about how there's people close to Trump who wish he would kind of return to the populism that boosted his ticket in 2015 and 2016, and saying, he's gotten away from that. He's only campaigning for those boat people, and he's talking about the capital gains tax. He's not talking enough about the forgotten men and women of America, which, by the way, is the theme of the RNC next week. So, but this is what's interesting about what the Democrats are doing. They're saying the political establishment has your best interests at heart. The political establishment, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, they are here for you because they've been here, they've been doing it for decades. This is the safe choice. That's what they are campaigning on. They're campaigning on the safe choice. They're campaigning on the political status quo. They're campaigning on America as it looked like in 2015. But what they're forgetting is that a lot of people were unhappy with the America of 2015 because the America of 2015 is what went on to elect Donald Trump in 2016. And that is where this becomes a serious question about their strategy. Again, we've had 4 years of Donald Trump now, so maybe there are these swing voters who are tired of the, quote, chaos that they're seeing in Washington, and they want to return to the status quo now. But that is certainly not what people wanted in 2016 and 2015. And it's also hard to imagine that there's a huge demographic for that now when people don't know what to believe in the media, no idea what to trust or believe in the media. They don't know they don't trust the political establishment because we're in the throes of a painful recession and the government can't even come to a deal on how they should address it financially. And they have no trust. I mean, we were told by political leaders different things about masks from the beginning of this entire pandemic, and then they changed their story. We've been told different things. how, I don't know, I can't even count how many times. And so people don't know who to trust. They don't know what to believe. And I don't know that there's this huge market for the vintage photographs of Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi saying, trust these people with the government. But I think what the Democrats are banking on is that there are enough people in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin to swing the vote. There are enough Obama-Trump voters, the hope and change to make America great again voters, who are just so sick of the dysfunctional government that they exist in, that the status quo will once again look appealing. I don't know if that's going to work. I have no idea if that's going to work, because this election is really going to, as all elections do, but this, particularly when we look at the results in 2016, they have to target this at the swing states. We know it's going to be close. We know the country is really divided. And so we know that this really all rests on people in those swing states. So I guess they're banking on that. And that's clearly the calculus behind the messaging of this convention. There's no other way to see it. That's what they're doing. They're doing it deliberately. They're doing it purposefully. But the question remains of, is this actually going to work? Maybe you guys have thoughts on that. I think that remains to be seen, because it's a long road between now and November. It's an unpredictable road between now and November. We don't know what's going to happen. A lot of things happened between August and November in 2016. But the important thing is, this DNC is incredibly boring. It's targeted at the center. And that's about all that we can say at this point. The final night of the DNC is tomorrow. Joe Biden himself is going to speak. It's going to be a really interesting to see what his actual message is, as someone who has the most radical platform. It's very much more radical than Hillary Clinton's platform was in 2016, or further left than Hillary Clinton's platform was in 2016. You don't have to take my word for it. That was an assessment that was made by McClatchy late last year when they took a look at his platform compared with Hillary Clinton's platform in 2016. And so it's an interesting dynamic, and it's going to be interesting to see how he takes his message with the most far left platform, a significantly further left platform than Hillary Clinton, and takes it to the public when the DNC really was targeting centrists. We've heard for a long time that Joe Biden he's moderate, he's centrist. I mean, sure, he's closer to the center than Kamala Harris, who jumped on Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill and then waffled about it. But he's not exactly a centrist anymore when you examine his platform, which, again, McClatchy did and said it was much further left than Hillary Clinton's, and Hillary Clinton's platform was already fairly far to the left. The thing to understand about these guys is that they're cultural leftists and corporatists, and we don't really have a good word for that. I've written about this at the Federalist. We don't have a good word for what to call someone. We want to call them centrists and moderates, because maybe they're moderate in tone and they're not super radical left in terms of the economy, because they're corporatist, establishment, swampy politicians, and that absolutely applies to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. But at the same time, they're culturally very far to the left. Kamala Harris pro reparations, and Green New Deal, and you could just go down the line. And Joe Biden's heading in that direction. But we call them centrists and moderate because they're not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders. If that's a centrist or moderate, I don't know what we've come to in this country. But again, this is a point about how we lack, we have a huge deficiency in our politics, is that we lack a word for this mounting army of Democrats who are radically cultural leftists, but are basically neoliberal corporatists when it comes to fiscal policies. And that's what you get in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. You're getting the political establishment. The Democrats seem happy to run on that when they're able to target their message at swing voters, but they also have to increase turnout in urban areas. And so we've seen a little bit of that. We've seen that sort of teased over the course of the convention. Again, there's a lot of time between now and November, but clearly Democrats know I mean, to get the Democratic Party, I really mean this, to give speeches in front of the Constitution and to say the Pledge of Allegiance and to sing the national anthem, it sounds ridiculous, but after the last few months, we should actually be aware that this takes a lot. They desperately want to win this election. I mean, every party desperately wants to win every election, but as we heard tonight, time and again, they believe the fate of the country rests on this election. It's Flight 93 for the Democrats and it's Flight 93 for the Republicans. And the Democrats are so hungry for a victory that they are going to talk up the Constitution. They're going to, make their play for those swing voters in Rust Belt states. And again, if that can normalize our fundamental agreement on our founding documents again, great. Whether that's enough to carry them to a victory in November, I think remains to be seen. There's a lot of time left, but we'll have to see what night 4 of the DNC has in store for us. I guarantee you it is substantially more boredom, but we'll have your coverage right here. So tune into the Federalist for ongoing coverage of the Democratic National Convention. We'll be here with the Republican National Convention as well. Have a great night, everyone.